Animated summary of White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. The book White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo is nothing less than a wake-up call to the world hell-bent on denying the existence of, or limiting the definition of, white privilege. The book contains a very enlightening analysis of today's progressive society to explain how embedded racism truly is in all of us. She begins Chapter 1 The challenges of talking to white people about racism with the narrative that white people do not identify themselves as a race, rather it is other cultures and ethnicities that are a race to them. They spend their whole lives living with this mindset, not even preparing themselves for roles that require leading people of all ethnicities, and rarely, if ever, does a person in such a society finds the courage to explore white fragility and racism. She pushes forth in Chapter 2 racism and white supremacy, saying that the idea of racism emerged when colonial rulers wanted to establish their superiority over the natives. The colonials had no reason whatsoever, so this need for an excuse to mark their superiority gave birth to racism. Racism does not emerge from race at all. In fact, race itself is a social construct birthed from racism, division and segregation. She walks us through the history of racism when moving on to Chapter 3 Racism after the Civil Rights Movement that marks the start on the discussion over our post-racial era. Which is an ironic name when today we see more and more cases of police brutality against black people, President Trump's travel ban on people from Muslim-majority countries and so forth. Yet people tend to not only forget about what borders on racism, but we the people, white people in particular, deny its existence. Not outright denying it, but in very subtle ways, saying they don't see color, showing aggression, saying they are being discriminated against, or challenging the movement of Black Lives Matter with All Lives Matter. The slogan is not only tone-deaf, it is insensitive. These are people who have lived in privilege, who feel safe around any situation because the system supports them, trying to equalize what they experience with black people who still can't feel safe around the very people meant to protect them. This is them saying that this behavior is equal, and it gets support only because the words sound inclusive, when truly this is accepting the system in its racist nature as it is. This is just one example of white fragility. Racism hasn't disappeared like many white people want to believe. It has simply morphed into something that is not as morally wrong as slavery and adapted to being invisible by the uninformed eye, but it is very much there. She explains the reasoning in Chapter 4, how does race shape the lives of white people, of how being born white had given her a sense of security and belonging which people of color are unlawfully stripped of. It is that sense of normality and belonging that the fragile white egos tend to defend. They do not want to be exposed to the discomfort any other race would have had to face. Now in Chapter 5 The Good-Bad Binary we see a glimpse of the real cause of white fragility. DiAngelo explains how during the civil rights movements, when white people saw black people being attacked inhumanely, it shook their conscience, and that etched into their minds. The new narrative was that the people attacking were evil, and the ones being attacked or defending them were good. This good versus bad argument, the problem with a white person being called racist isn't with racism, it is with the idea that they are being called a bad person. A matter of not righteousness but ego. In Chapter 6 Anti-Blackness, 7 Racial Triggers for White People, 8 The Result, White Fragility, and 9 White Fragility in Action. She expands on how white people have pushed the idea of a white race in order to maintain the existence of a black one. Their underlying and obvious dislike for those of a different race is denied in an effort to look like the good guys. And whenever this is challenged, they charge to defend it. They do not want mentions of their privilege shown to them, for that would mean they'd have to acknowledge their side of the scale is tipped. Once they do, they will be morally obligated to form a balance. And while they seem to say they want equality, they really don't want to lose the upper hand they have. Their defensive methods sometimes call for saying that the minority challenging them is dangerous, playing the victim and consequently the system to maintain that superiority. One of the pillars that hold it in place is making whiteness the norm. Think about the word skin colored. What immediately flashes in your mind is not a dark shade, rather a tone slightly beige than completely white. This is because it has been accepted as the standard skin tone, therefore, making anything besides the norm unnatural. The groundbreaking book White Fragility ends with DiAngelo providing simple practices that white people can use to work on their own. White Fragility in Chapter 10 White Fragility and the Rules of Engagement, further elaborating that interrupting racism is an act of courage and must always be practiced, for it has taken millennia to take root. It is going to take at least decades to weed out. It is high time for people to intentionally and methodically take the right steps in their own lives to weed out white supremacy and racist structures that persist even today. DiAngelo spared no one when speaking the raw, bitter truth, including herself. In Chapter 11, White Women's Tears, she gives the reader a little vignette from her own experience, where she observed herself having a conversation about a black woman's hair that had unintentional underlying racism. She then corrects herself in an effort to continue identifying her own racist behavior in a process of growth, because it has been woven into the fabric of society and needs consistent effort to erase completely. This vignette gives the reader an idea of what that growth looks like and gives them a sense of what's possible. Followed by advice on what to do about it in Chapter 12, Where Do We Go From Here? To conclude, White Fragility therefore offers readers a rare insight into the white supremacist society that all of us are guilty of building, brick by brick, and how to erase it. That is the core messages gathered from Robin DiAngelo, White Fragility. That tries to talk us through racism. If you want to read more books in less time, please click on the subscribe button and turn on notification to get animated book summaries of the best books around the world. This is only a summary animation video for White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, produced for fast and easy digestion of the main points from the book. To get the full gist, we recommend you buy the original book using the link in the description. If you enjoyed my video, kindly like and share this video as it will help my channel grow and encourage me to make more interesting videos for you. Thanks for watching.